Hi, I'm Sheila from To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, and over the last little while, there's been quite a hubbub because the transformed wife made a video where she said that I don't agree with obligation sex and that I think that it's perfectly fine to refuse your husband. I haven't actually seen the video because, of course, I'm blocked. But I want to address this because I'm really concerned that a lot of people don't understand what God means by sex, and they're missing out on God's heart for marriage. God wants you to have an amazing marriage and an amazing sex life. This is such an important part of marriage, but we're going to miss the mark if we don't understand what godly sex means. So, can we start with the definition of sex? If I were to ask you, did you have sex last night? Chances are you're thinking that what I'm asking is something like, did he put his penis into your vagina and move around until he climaxed, right? That's what we tend to think sex is: penis, vagina, move around, climax. That's the definition of intercourse. But is it really the definition of sex? Because if that's what's happening, you as the woman could be lying there making a grocery list in your head, like not involved at all. You could be lying there in emotional pain, feeling used and abused, or you could be lying there in actual physical pain from vaginismus or some other condition, and it would still count as having sex. Let's remember that 22% of Christian women experience sexual pain, and 7% to the point that intercourse is virtually impossible. And so pain's a real thing. Now, if she's not engaged in the whole process, the way that we define sex is about what he's doing, and what she's doing, the only thing she's to do is show up. In fact, there was even a comment I saw a screenshot from the Transformed Wife's blog where it says all she has to do is lie on her back. If that's what we think sex is, we are missing out on the biblical definition of sex. So let's talk about what the Bible actually says about sex. In Genesis chapter 4, there's this funny verse where it says, Adam knew his wife Eve, and they conceived unto them a son. And we can read that and we can think, oh, right, God's just embarrassed of using the real word for sex. But I don't think that's what's going on. God uses the word howdah, the Hebrew word howdah there, for to know. And it's the same word that David uses in the Psalms when he says, search me and know me, O God. That knowing tells us that sex is not just physical. It's this deep intimacy, this deep longing to be connected. It's supposed to be something that joins you. That's why God uses sexual imagery to talk about his relationship with us. And so sex is a deep knowing of two people joining together, which means that both of you matter. If one of you doesn't matter, it's not a knowing, it's a using. And using is not biblical. Knowing is biblical. Okay, so we know from the Bible that sex is intimate. When you read Song of Solomon, you find that sex is also supposed to be very pleasurable for both, not just for him, for her too. Okay, so sex is intimate, sex is pleasurable, and then when we turn to 1 Corinthians 7, 3-5, we see that sex is also mutual, completely and utterly mutual. So biblical sex is intimate, mutual, and pleasurable. It is not one-sided intercourse. I'm about to lose my battery, so hold on. I didn't realize my battery was low. I am plugging my computer in, and then I will resume. Okay, here we go. So biblically, sex is mutual, intimate, and pleasurable. What happens, though, if we define sex as merely one-sided intercourse, where he gets his climax and she could be lying there doing absolutely nothing, she just makes herself available? Is that sex? Well, no, it's not. It really isn't. And let's take another look at 1 Corinthians 7 to understand what I mean, because a lot of people were using 1 Corinthians 7 on the Transforms Wife page to say that you're not allowed to refuse him. So what does 1 Corinthians 7, 3-5 actually say? Well, the first thing that you'll notice if you read those verses is that the wife's sexual needs are mentioned first. It says the husband must fulfill his sexual duties to his wife, his marital duties to his wife. So her needs are mentioned first. But the big thing about that whole passage is that both of them, whatever he gets, she gets too. So the husband must fulfill his marital duties to his wife. The wife must fulfill her duties to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to him. The husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to the wife. And do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time that you may devote yourselves to prayer and fasting, but then come together again so that you do not, so that you won't be tempted by your lack of self-control. Okay, so that's what those verses say. Let's dissect them a little bit. As I said, wife's needs are mentioned first. But the other thing is that when this passage was written in Roman times, husbands had complete authority over their wives' bodies to the point that they could murder them if they wanted to. So to say that the wife's body belonged to the husband, well, yeah, obviously. I mean, we all know that. But what Paul said was that the husband's body, in the same way, belongs to the wife. So he does not have any more authority over her than she does over him. In fact, the only place where authority in marriage is explicitly mentioned in the Bible is in 1 Corinthians 7:3-5, and that authority is mutually shared. All right, so here we have this picture of beautiful mutuality. That's the whole point. And then Paul says, do not deprive. What does do not deprive mean? Well, if our definition of sex is something which is mutual, intimate, and pleasurable, then when we're saying do not deprive, we're saying her needs matter. If sex is only one-sided intercourse, she is already being deprived. That doesn't even count. So to tell her that she has to give one-sided intercourse so that she doesn't deprive him, then it doesn't even fit into those Bible verses, because the very nature of one-sided intercourse means that she's being deprived. As soon as you put an obligation on it, you are depriving her because it's no longer mutual. And this is so important to understand. Did you realize that we have a 47-point orgasm gap in the Christian church? 95% of men almost always or always reach orgasm during a sexual encounter, but only 48 to 49% of women do. So that's about a 47-point orgasm gap. There's already a ton of women being deprived. And let me tell you, women are most likely to be deprived if they are talking about the obligation sex message, because the women who aren't deprived are the ones who are doing this because they want to, because their husbands make their pleasure a priority. You know, when women believe that they are obligated to give their husbands sex when their husbands want it, their orgasm rates go down, their libido tanks, everything bad that you can possibly imagine happens. And the most important one is that her rates of sexual pain increase to almost the same statistical effect as prior abuse would do. Okay, so in other words, her body interprets the obligation sex message as a form of trauma. Her body reacts to the obligation sex message in the same way as abuse, because both of them have the same message. They say, you don't matter. Your needs don't matter. He has the right to use you no matter what you are feeling, and that is not biblical. That is not of Jesus. Do you think that the Jesus that we serve is pleased and happy with a woman in emotional turmoil, allowing her husband to use her like a receptacle, that he can get pleasure from something that causes her pain? Do you think that Jesus looks down on that and is happy? Or do you think Jesus looks down on that and is sad for that woman and is devastated for that, for the total selfishness that that husband is showing? Obligation sex is the most toxic thing that we can do in the bedroom. And there's a simple way around it. If you want women to have sex, just don't talk about obligation sex. Tell men, hey guys, your wife matters. Make her pleasure a priority. If you want her to have orgasms, if you want her to have a libido, if you want her to want to have sex, if you want your sex life to thrive, you get rid of the obligation sex message and you instead tell men, make her pleasure a priority. If she doesn't want sex, figure out why. And then all of a sudden her libido can blossom. Jesus cares about you women. That is the message of sex in the Bible, is that you matter. You fundamentally matter. He does not want your husband to get pleasure from something that causes you emotional or physical turmoil. He really doesn't. You matter just as much as he does. Jesus does not look down on your marriage and say your husband's needs matter more than yours. He doesn't. What he does is he looks down on marriage and he says, how can you love each other? And allowing your husband to use you as a masturbatory aid is not acting in the loving way towards your husband, because it is encouraging selfishness in him. It is enabling him to act in an unchristlike manner. When we instead say, hey, hold on a second, sex is something which is supposed to be beautiful in our marriage. It's something which is supposed to bring us together. It's supposed to be life-giving, not soul-crushing. Right now, sex is not that for us. Right now, sex is me feeling used. And we need to get away from this so that we can rediscover what sex is supposed to be. God made it so that you matter. And in the bedroom, that's supposed to be the biggest pinnacle of that. You know, the whole reason that God put the clitoris outside the vagina is so that the way that you feel pleasure is by you being the center of attention for a while. That is actually God's design, is that he spend time pleasuring you, because the way that you get pleasure the most is not through intercourse. It's through him stimulating you in a way which does not directly stimulate him, and that is God's design. God's design is that women be the center of attention for a while so that men can learn to serve us sometimes too. And then that serving becomes reciprocal, and sex becomes a beautiful picture of this mutual servanthood that we have. That is what sex is supposed to be in marriage. It is not one-sided intercourse. And so, dear ladies, if you have been taught that you don't matter, that he has the right to use your body no matter what you are going through, that he can grope you at any time, I just want to tell you that's not of Jesus. Consent matters. Rape can happen in marriage, and God is not pleased with it. This really pains me when I see people spreading lies that keep women in bondage, and we need to start rejecting them. So please know that there is a better way. Know that there's a Jesus out there who looks down and loves you and cares about you. And yes, he wants you to have an awesome sex life, but it can only be awesome when both of you understand that you matter too. So I encourage you, if you're just new to the blog, please look around. I've posted some links to some recent podcasts on duty sex to listen to. Our new book, The Great Sex Rescue, we surveyed 22,000 women to find out what makes sex great and what evangelical teachings hurt sex. And it's not that I'm against sex. I actually want amazing sex lives in marriage. But again, mutual, intimate, pleasurable, that's biblical sex. One-sided intercourse is not. And forcing or telling wives that they must give sexual favors with no regard to the wife's feelings or the wife's soul, again, that's soul-crushing, not life-giving. And we serve a Jesus who is the way, the truth, and the life. When the message that you receive bring death, not life, those messages are not of Christ. And you're allowed to use discernment. You're allowed to reject them. And if that's the culture that you're in, if that's the church community that you're in, I encourage you, please read outside of that community. Look outside of that community, because Jesus wants to show you love. Jesus wants you to know that you matter. Jesus does not care about your husband more than he cares about you. And I just so want you to experience that wonderful love that Jesus has for you. So please reach out. Message me if you want, leave comments on these posts, and let's have a discussion on how you can find that kind of freedom. And I hope that you will read The Great Sex Rescue too, and see that there is a better way to look at sex that is life-giving. Thank you.